The operating room at a Boston Memorial Hospital had a particular kind of silence at 11:47 at night. Not peaceful, not calm, the kind of silence that came right before everything went wrong. Dr. Emily Bradford arranged her instruments with hands that didn't shake. 29 years old, 8 months into her civilian nursing career, and she'd learned to keep her eyes down when the surgeons started their commentary. The stainless steel gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as she positioned each tool with almost ceremonial precision. "Look who they assigned to assist tonight," Dr. Richard Patterson muttered to his resident. The lead trauma surgeon didn't bother lowering his voice. 48 years old, 15 years of experience, and absolutely certain of his own brilliance. Dr. Marcus Whitfield snickered from across the sterile field. "The new girl, Bradford Wright, she looks like she belongs in pediatrics, not a high-stakes trauma bay." Emily's jaw clenched beneath her surgical mask. Her fingers continued their methodical work. Scalpel, retractor, clamp. Each instrument exactly where it needed to be positioned and with the kind of muscle memory that came from performing this ritual in places where a single mistake meant death. Places these men had never seen. "Hope she doesn't faint when we crack the chest." Whitfield continued warming to his audience. "This isn't like bandaging scraped knees at the campus clinic." They saw exactly what they wanted to see. A young woman barely 30 with a quiet demeanor they mistook for timidity. Someone who looked better suited for checking vitals on a pediatric ward than standing in the savage, unforgiving arena of trauma surgery. What they didn't see were the ghosts standing behind her. The soldiers she'd fought to save. The chaos of a field hospital in Kandahar that these sterile walls could never imagine. That place where the air hung thick with the smell of blood and burning metal, where the only light came from a single surgical lamp powered by a generator that sputtered and coughed like a dying man. In this gleaming, immaculate medical facility, she wasn't Major Bradford, the decorated military surgeon who'd earned the respect of battle-hardened Rangers by dragging them back from death's door in the back of shaking helicopters under enemy fire. Here she was just the new hire, an intruder they could dismiss with casual, thoughtless cruelty. The emergency bay doors exploded inward with a crash that shattered the pretense of routine. The morning's quiet detonated into an orchestra of controlled chaos. Urgent voices, racing footsteps, the sharp smell of blood cutting through antiseptic. "GSW to the chest and abdomen," the first responder barked out, his voice tight with the kind of urgency that meant seconds mattered more than minutes. He and his partner maneuvered the bleeding, unconscious figure onto the surgical table with practiced efficiency. Multiple entry wounds, BP dropping, he's circling the drain. The trauma team descended on the gurney like a well-rehearsed swarm, cutting away blood-soaked clothing, assessing damage, shouting vital signs that painted a picture of a life balanced on a razor's edge. Emily caught a glimpse of the patient's face as they transferred him to the table, and her heart stopped. She knew that face. She recognized the weathered, tattered dog tags hanging around his neck, the ones she was now carefully lifting to place on the instrument tray. Her fingers brushed against the metal, and 8 years of buried memories came flooding back. This was the man who'd carried 3 wounded Rangers to safety under direct fire in Helmand Province. The soldier whose quiet heroism had become legend among her unit. He'd earned a Purple Heart for his own wounds and a Bronze Star for his courage before his medical separation. And now he was here, bleeding out on a gurney in Boston, 1,000 miles and a lifetime away from the war that had forged them both. Sergeant Daniel Reeves, 26 years old, Navy SEAL, and dying. During the surgical prep, Emily's mind raced through combat protocols. The battlefield surgeon inside her took over assessing, evaluating. Entry wounds, trajectory, fragmentation pattern. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a random shooting. This was something closer, something more deliberate. Dr. Patterson positioned himself at the head of the table, the undisputed monarch of his domain. He glanced at Emily, his eyes cold and dismissive above his mask. "Just try to keep up, Bradford," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Hand me instruments when I call for them. Don't anticipate. Don't think. Just assist." Then he made his first incision. The moment Patterson's blade touched the patient's flesh, Sergeant Reeves's fragile stability shattered. The steady, measured beep of the cardiac monitor transformed into a wild, shrill alarm. The numbers on the blood pressure display began to plummet, a numerical avalanche of approaching death that sent a surge of adrenaline through the room. "He's bleeding out faster than anticipated," Patterson muttered, his confident demeanor beginning to fracture. Sweat formed on his temple, a stark contrast to the cold, controlled atmosphere of the surgical theater. Emily watched from her position as the secondary assistant, Her mind a frozen crystalline instrument of analysis. Her trained perception, sharpened by years of making life-or-death decisions in seconds, instantly recognized what the lead surgeon was missing. The entry wound pattern, the bullet's trajectory, the subtle, almost imperceptible way the patient's chest wall shifted with each labored breath. This was a story she'd read 100 times before in the blood and chaos of Afghanistan. Patterson was looking in completely the wrong places. He was following textbook protocol, an orderly, tidy set of rules for an orderly, tidy reality. But this wasn't an orderly wound. This was the dirty, chaotic, volatile reality of high-velocity trauma. From the head of the table, the anesthesiologist called out, his voice constricted with an anxiety that was rapidly converting to panic. BP dropping to 60/40, heart rate climbing to 120. We're losing him, Dr. Patterson. Emily spoke softly, her voice barely audible above the screaming monitors. She moved closer to the table, her presence a quiet, calm island in an ocean of rising fear. Dr. Patterson, she said, the bleeding might be coming from the intercostal vessels. The trajectory suggests posterior damage. If we don't explore the back wall, Patterson erupted without even looking up from the patient's chest. His hands continued their increasingly frantic search. I didn't ask for your input, Bradford. I've been doing trauma surgery since before you graduated nursing school. Hand me another clamp. The other surgeons remained silent, their faces hidden behind masks, but Emily could feel their attention on her. They were waiting for her to retreat, to withdraw to her assigned role as the silent, invisible assistant who knew her place. But Emily had never been someone who retreated when a life was at stake. She'd learned her medicine in places where ego was a luxury nobody could afford, where the only thing that mattered was keeping the patient on the table breathing for one more moment, one more hour. The monitors continued their urgent, unrelenting warnings. Sergeant Reeves was dying. Right here. Right now. On this table in this gleaming hospital, because one man's arrogance was more important than the truth. Patterson muttered more to himself than anyone present. His hands, which had seemed so confident and steady just moments before, now trembled slightly as he probed the wound. His search becoming more wild, more desperate. Where is this bleeding coming from? He said, his voice rising. Where the hell? Emily made her decision. She couldn't stand passive and watch a fellow warrior die because of one man's pride. She stepped closer to the table, her voice calm but infused with an authority that made the resident beside her flinch. Sir, with respect, we need to explore the posterior chest wall. The angle of entry suggests damage to the vertebral artery branches. If we don't find it now, he won't make it. Patterson's voice elevated to a sharp, angry crack in the tension-soaked room. That's enough, Bradford. You are here to observe and assist, not to play trauma surgeon. Now step back and let me do my job. But then, as if summoned by the discord in their voices, Sergeant Reeves's eyes suddenly snapped open. The anesthesia had failed, his body fighting through the sedation with whatever reserves of strength it had left. His eyes darted around the room in frantic terror, finally focusing on Emily's face above her surgical mask. A jolt of recognition as sharp and clear as electricity cut through the fog of pain and drugs. His hand launched upward with surprising force for someone bleeding to death. Fingers locked around Emily's wrist with a grip that was iron-strong despite his condition. Through the breathing tube, he managed to force a sound, a desperate, choked word that everyone in the room could understand. Doc. Bradford, he wheezed, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Afghanistan, you saved us. The entire surgical team froze. Patterson's hands stopped moving. The room descended into complete, utter silence, except for the persistent wail of the monitors. Sergeant Reeves's grip tightened on Emily's wrist. With a final tremendous effort, he spoke again, his voice stronger, sharper, a command from the edge of death. Get Dr. Bradford. She knows combat trauma. She knows what this is. In that instant, every assumption, every patronizing gesture, every dismissive glance the surgical team had aimed at the quiet new nurse evaporated into dust. The mocking whispers died in their throats. They weren't looking at a recent hire anymore. They were looking at a battlefield veteran, a surgeon who'd earned her credentials in the most merciless classroom that existed. Dr. Patterson's face had gone ashen behind his mask. His eyes met Emily's across the surgical table. For the first time, she saw something other than condescension in his expression. She saw fear, and she saw the desperate, unspoken plea for help from a man who suddenly understood that his patient's life depended on an experience he'd never possessed. Dr. Bradford, Patterson said, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you need? Emily didn't waste a single second on explanations or vindication. The monitors showed Sergeant Reeves descending deeper into hemorrhagic shock. His life measured in the wild, erratic pulses that were growing fainter by the instant. Every moment of delay carried him closer to the point of no return. She stepped forward, her military training taking control. A mechanism activating in her mind that transformed her from a silent assistant into a commanding officer in a mass casualty situation. I need a thoracotomy tray and 2 units of O-negative blood stat, she stated, her voice cutting through the tension with practiced authority that made the entire room snap to attention. And someone call the blood bank. We're going to need at least 6 more units on standby. Now, move. The surgical team, paralyzed by uncertainty just seconds before, operated with renewed and frantic purpose. The ridicule and doubt that had saturated the room evaporated, replaced by the focused, almost desperate intensity of a crew that had been given a clear, transparent mission. The resident who'd joked about her fainting now rushed to retrieve the thoracotomy tray, his hands shaking more than hers ever had. The entry wounds suggest the bullets fragmented after impact, Emily explained as she worked her hands, moving with a speed and precision that was breathtaking to witness. It was muscle memory built in the furnace of war, a capability honed by performing these exact procedures under the dim light of a field tent with the sound of hostile fire in the distance. In Afghanistan, we saw this pattern constantly. The primary bleeding isn't from the obvious wounds. It's from secondary damage caused by bone fragments acting as projectiles inside the chest cavity. Dr. Patterson watched his initial shock yielding to a dawning fascination and a deep expanding respect. He assisted her now, passing her instruments, his movements respectful, the movements of a student watching a master. Emily's approach was different from anything he'd ever witnessed in his 15 years of civilian trauma surgery. It was efficient, decisive, brutally proficient. Every incision, every clamp placement was exactly where it needed to be. No wasted motion, no hesitation. From the edge of the sterile field, one of the residents murmured to another, his voice filled with awe, "Jesus, look at her technique. It's flawless." Emily located the source of the hemorrhage within minutes. A severed intercostal artery hidden behind a jagged fragment of rib bone, exactly where she'd predicted it would be. As she worked to repair the damage, she continued to instruct, her voice a steady, calm presence in the high-pressure drama unfolding around them. In combat medicine, you learn to read the story the wounds tell you. She said, her fingers moving with the refined grace of a master craftsman as she sutured the damaged vessel. Civilian trauma often follows predictable patterns: gunshot wounds from handguns, stab wounds, blunt force trauma from accidents. But military trauma is different. She paused to request another clamp, which Patterson handed her instantly. High-velocity rounds don't just punch holes, she continued. They create cavitation effects, a shockwave that damages tissue far from the apparent injury site. You have to think three-dimensionally. You have to think like the bullet traveled. As Emily controlled the hemorrhage, the frantic screaming of the monitors began to slow, returning to a more manageable, life-sustaining rhythm. Sergeant Reeves's blood pressure started to climb, moving from the edge of death back toward the realm of the living. His pressure's coming up, the anesthesiologist announced, his voice saturated with a relief that was almost tangible. 110/70 and climbing. Sinus rhythm established. Emily allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile behind her mask. She'd seen too many good soldiers die from injuries that were survivable with the right knowledge and quick action. Sergeant Reeves wasn't going to be one of them. Not on her watch. As she began to close the surgical site, she was aware that the entire team was watching her every movement. Their earlier ridicule replaced by unspoken, almost worshipful silence. The transformation in the room was total and complete. She was no longer the inexperienced, recent hire who didn't belong. She was a battlefield veteran, a master of her craft, a surgeon who'd earned her expertise in the most rigorous circumstances imaginable. When they prepared to transport Sergeant Reeves to the recovery unit, Dr. Patterson spoke. His voice carried a weight it hadn't possessed before. "Dr. Bradford, I owe you an apology. We all do." Emily looked up from her final sutures, her eyes meeting his across the table. Behind the exhaustion and the adrenaline crash, there was something else, a quiet dignity that couldn't be diminished by their earlier contempt. "No apology necessary, doctor," she said evenly. "We all want the same thing, to save lives, but maybe next time we could skip the assumptions and just focus on the patient." The surgical suite erupted in quiet, relieved laughter, the kind that comes after surviving something that could have gone terribly wrong. But Emily wasn't finished. Removing her gloves with slow, deliberate movements, she looked at Patterson with an expression that made him straighten slightly. Actually, there's something else you should know about Sergeant Reeves' case, she said, her voice dropping lower, more serious. His injuries weren't from a random shooting. They weren't from a training accident. The room fell silent again, a new mystery hanging in the air like smoke. The wound pattern, the trajectory, the grouping, Emily continued. This was a professional hit, military precision. Someone with training tried to kill him. And judging by the entry points, they knew exactly what they were doing. She stripped off her surgical gown, her movements measured and controlled despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Whoever shot Sergeant Reeves wasn't trying to rob him. They were trying to execute him. Dr. Patterson's face went pale. Are you certain? Emily's eyes were hard. Certain. The eyes of someone who'd seen this before. I'm certain. I've treated enough gunshot wounds to know the difference between street violence and an assassination attempt. Someone wanted this man dead, and when they find out he survived, they're going to try again. She walked toward the scrub room, her footsteps echoing in the unnaturally quiet operating theater. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. You might want to call security, she said, and maybe someone should contact military police, because this case just became a lot more complicated than a trauma surgery. Then she disappeared through the doors, leaving behind a room full of people who were only beginning to understand that they'd just witnessed something far more significant than an impressive medical procedure. 10 minutes later, Emily sat alone in the staff locker room. Her hands steady throughout the entire surgery, now trembled slightly as she removed her scrub cap. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind the familiar hollowness that always followed combat. Even combat in a sterile operating room. She stared at her reflection in the mirror above the sink. 29 years old, 8 months back in civilian life. And she'd just broken every promise she'd made to herself about leaving the war behind. The door opened behind her. Emily straightened, expecting Patterson, or maybe one of the residents wanting to ask questions. Instead, Victoria Blackwood walked in. The hospital's director of operations was 55 years old, impeccably dressed, even at midnight, with ice-gray eyes that had turned ambitious young doctors into obedient subordinates and crushed opposition with bureaucratic efficiency. Dr. Bradford, Blackwood said. Her voice was silk over steel. My office, now. Emily's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. She'd heard it from commanding officers right before they delivered career-ending news. Ma'am, I can explain. My office. Blackwood repeated, her voice not rising but somehow becoming colder. Immediately. Emily followed her through the empty hallways of the hospital. Their footsteps echoed off polished floors, past darkened administrative offices and the soft beeping of patient monitors from the wards. The walk felt like a death march. Blackwood's office was her own glass and chrome. Modern, efficient, deliberately intimidating. She gestured to a chair without sitting herself. A power play Emily recognized from a dozen briefings with officers who wanted to remind you of your place. Do you know what you did tonight? Blackwood asked. I saved a patient's life, Emily replied, keeping her voice level. You violated protocol. You superseded the authority of the attending surgeon. You created an unsafe environment by disrupting the established chain of command. Dr. Patterson was making a mistake. Sergeant Reeves would have died. That was Dr. Patterson's call to make. Blackwood interrupted. Not yours. You are a nurse, Dr. Bradford. Not a surgeon. Not anymore. You seem to have forgotten the difference. Emily felt heat rising in her chest. I'm a registered nurse with 8 years of military surgical experience, which means nothing here, Blackwood said, her voice cutting like a scalpel. This is a civilian hospital. We have rules, procedures, liability concerns. We cannot have staff members going rogue because they think they know better. I don't think I know better. I do know better. I've performed over 300 trauma surgeries in combat conditions. In a war zone, Blackwood said, where apparently the rules were different. But you're not in Afghanistan anymore, Dr. Bradford. You're in Boston Memorial Hospital, and here we follow protocol. We respect hierarchy. We maintain order. She pulled a manila folder from her desk drawer and placed it in front of Emily. This is your termination notice, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You have 15 minutes to clear out your locker. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. You're firing me for saving a patient's life. I'm firing you for violating hospital policy and creating liability exposure. Blackwood said, her voice never rising above that same cold professional tone. The decision is final. There is no appeal process for probationary employees. Emily stared at the folder, her mind reeling. 8 months of trying to build a new life. 8 months of swallowing her pride and accepting their assumptions and keeping her head down. All of it destroyed in one night because she dared to do what she'd been trained to do: save lives. "This is wrong," Emily said quietly. "What's wrong?" Blackwood replied, "and is thinking that your past qualifications give you the right to override established procedures. You should have stayed in your lane, Dr. Bradford. Now you'll have to find another hospital that's willing to take a chance on someone with your particular history of insubordination." Emily stood slowly, her legs feeling numb. She picked up the folder without opening it. "Is that all, ma'am?" "That's all. Security is waiting outside to escort you out." Emily walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. She looked back at Victoria Blackwood, who was already turning to her computer as if Emily had ceased to exist. "For what it's worth," Emily said, "Sergeant Reeves is alive right now because I violated your protocol. In the military, we had a different protocol: the mission first, the person in front of you second, everything else distant third. Maybe that doesn't work in a civilian hospital. But that's who I am. That's who I'll always be." Blackwood didn't look up from her screen. "Goodbye, Dr. Bradford." Emily left the office, the folder clutched in her hand. Two security guards stood waiting in the hallway, their faces professionally neutral. They flanked her as she walked back to the locker room, silent witnesses to her humiliation. She packed her few belongings in a small gym bag: her civilian clothes, a photo of her old unit from Afghanistan, the bronze star she kept hidden in her locker because it felt wrong to display it in a place where nobody understood what it meant. The security guards escorted her through the hospital, past the emergency department, where she'd worked for 8 months, past the break room, where she'd eaten lunch alone more times than she could count, past the surgical wing, where Sergeant Reeves was probably still in recovery alive because she'd broken the rules. They pushed through the exit doors into the cold November night. The parking lot stretched out before her, mostly empty at this hour. Sodium lights cast everything in an orange glow that felt artificial and wrong. Emily took 3 steps toward her car before she noticed them. 10 black SUVs arranged in a precise semicircle in the parking lot, their engines running, their tinted windows revealing nothing. Their presence was unmistakable and impossible to ignore. She stopped walking. The security guards stopped too, their radios crackling with sudden urgent chatter. The driver's door of the center SUV opened. A man stepped out, tall, gray-haired, wearing a suit that screamed federal agent or military brass. He walked toward Emily with the kind of measured confidence that came from years of giving orders that people followed without question. Behind him, doors opened on the other vehicles. More people emerged, some in suits, some in what looked like tactical gear under civilian jackets. All of them focused on her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. The gray-haired man stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to maintain tactical distance. Emily recognized the positioning. She'd seen it 1,000 times in briefings with high-ranking officers. "Dr. Emily Bradford?" he asked. His voice was deep, carrying the distinctive cadence of someone who'd spent decades in the military. "That's me," Emily replied, her mind racing through possibilities. "None of them good." "Colonel James Garrett, Joint Special Operations Command." He pulled an ID from his jacket and held it up long enough for her to verify it was legitimate. "We need to talk. Somewhere private, somewhere secure." Emily glanced at the security guards, who looked completely out of their depth. "Talk about what?" she asked. "About Sergeant Daniel Reeves," Garrett said. "About the men who tried to kill him tonight. And about why you're the only person who can keep him alive." One of the security guards stepped forward uncertainly. "Ma'am, we're supposed to escort you off the property." "You can go," Garrett said, not taking his eyes off Emily. His voice carried the kind of authority that made the security guards exchange uncertain glances. "Dr. Bradford is coming with us." "Sir, I don't think we have authorization." Garrett finally looked at them. "I'm not asking permission. This is a matter of national security. You can call your supervisor if you need to, but Dr. Bradford is coming with us. Right now." The security guards looked at Emily, then at the 10 SUVs full of people who clearly weren't hospital security, then back at each other. One of them reached for his radio. "That's fine," Garrett said. "Make your call. We'll wait exactly 60 seconds, then we're leaving, with or without your authorization." Emily made her decision. "I'll go," she said. Looking at the security guards, she added, "Tell your supervisor I left voluntarily. No kidnapping, no force. I went with these people because they asked nicely." She walked toward Colonel Garrett. Behind her, she heard one of the security guards urgently speaking into his radio, his voice rising with stress. Garrett gestured toward the center SUV. "This way, Doctor. We have a lot to discuss, and not much time to discuss it." Emily climbed into the back seat. The interior was clean, professional, and probably equipped with enough surveillance equipment to record every word she was about to say. Garrett climbed in beside him. Another man, younger and harder looking, sat in the front passenger seat. The driver pulled away from the hospital before her door was fully closed. "Where are we going?" Emily asked. "Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted," Garrett replied. "Somewhere the people who tried to kill Sergeant Reeves can't listen in." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen a few times. A photograph appeared. Emily recognized Sergeant Reeves, but younger, in full combat gear, standing with a team of operators in what looked like somewhere in the Middle East. "Sergeant Reeves wasn't in Boston by accident," Garrett said. "He was here on a classified assignment, an investigation into defense contract fraud. We're talking billions of dollars, fraudulent equipment, substandard armor, medical supplies that don't meet spec. All of it sold to the military at premium prices while soldiers die because their gear fails." He swiped to another image, this one showing a document covered in official stamps and classifications. Reeves was gathering evidence, building a case. He had proof that could send 40 people to prison. Defense contractors, Pentagon officials, congressional staffers. He was 3 days away from delivering his report when someone tried to kill him. Emily studied the documents, her mind processing the implications. "Someone in your chain of command." "We don't know how high it goes," Garrett admitted. "That's why I'm here instead of someone from the agency. That's why it's 10 SUVs full of people I personally trust instead of going through official channels. We have a leak, a bad one. And until we find it, Sergeant Reeves is a target." He looked at Emily directly. "You saved his life tonight, and you're right about the wounds. That was a professional hit. Military precision. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing." "So why do you need me?" Emily asked. "You've got a whole team, medical personnel, protection specialists." "Because someone already tried to kill him once inside the hospital," Garrett said. 20 minutes after your surgery, a nurse walked into his recovery room with a syringe full of potassium chloride. Security caught her on camera. She ran when the alarms went off. He showed her the surveillance footage. A woman in scrubs, moving with purpose, injecting something into Reeves's IV port, then freezing when the monitors started screaming, running. "We grabbed her 3 blocks away," Garrett continued. "She had no ID, no hospital badge, no record of ever working at Boston Memorial. Professional, trained, and she knew exactly how to access that room without triggering security protocols." Emily's blood ran cold. "So they're inside the hospital." "They're everywhere," Garrett said grimly. "Hospital staff, security contractors, maybe even the police. We can't trust anyone except you." "Why me?" "Because Sergeant Reeves trusts you. Because when he woke up on that table, you were the only person he recognized. The only person he knew for certain wasn't trying to kill him. And because you have combat experience. You know how to operate in hostile territory." The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage, the convoy following in precise formation. Garrett waited until they'd parked and the driver had killed the engine before continuing. "I'm not asking you to be a soldier again, Dr. Bradford. I'm asking you to be a doctor. Keep Reeves alive while we figure out who's trying to kill him and why. You'll have protection, resources, whatever you need." Emily looked at the colonel, at the genuine concern in his face, at the weight of responsibility he was carrying. "I just got fired," she said, "from a job I didn't even like that much. I've got no obligations, no ties, nothing keeping me in Boston." "I know," Garrett said. "I pulled your file before I came here. I know about Afghanistan, about the Bronze Star you earned dragging 2 Rangers out of a building that was literally on fire, about the medical separations you recommended that saved careers, about why you left the military." Emily's jaw tightened. "Then you know I left for a reason." "I do, but I also know that when it mattered, when a life was on the line, you didn't hesitate. You broke the rules. You took control. You saved him. That's who you are, Dr. Bradford. That's who you've always been." He extended his hand. "I'm not ordering you. I can't. You're a civilian now, but I'm asking, help us keep this man alive. Help us bring down the people who are stealing from soldiers and killing anyone who gets in their way." Emily looked at his hand, at the choice he was offering her. She could walk away, go back to trying to build a civilian life, find another hospital job, keep her head down, follow the rules. Or she could do what she'd been trained to do, what she was good at, what she'd missed every single day for the last 8 months. She reached out and shook his hand. "I'm in, But I have conditions. I run the medical side. No interference, no overruling my decisions. If I say he needs something, he gets it immediately. Garrett smiled slightly. Agreed. And when this is over, when Reeves is safe and your bad guys are in prison, I want a letter of recommendation. From you personally. I'm going to need it to find another job after tonight. Done. Anything else? Emily thought for a moment. Yeah, someone needs to tell that hospital director that she made a mistake. Not because of protocol or liability, because she forgot what medicine is actually about. Garrett's smile widened. I think that can be arranged. Now come on, let's go meet your patient. He's been asking about you since he woke up. They exited the SUV and walked toward a secure entrance. The other vehicles had formed a protective perimeter, armed personnel stationed at every approach. This wasn't just protection. This was a military operation. Emily followed Colonel Garrett through reinforced doors into a secure facility that looked like it had been designed for exactly this kind of situation. Somewhere between a bunker and a hospital wing. Somewhere that could be defended if necessary. And somewhere in these secured halls, Sergeant Daniel Reeves was waiting. Alive. Protected. And according to Garrett, refusing to talk to anyone except the woman who'd saved his life. Emily squared her shoulders and followed the colonel deeper into the facility. Behind her, the doors sealed with a heavy mechanical sound that felt like crossing a threshold. She wasn't a civilian nurse anymore. She wasn't a fired hospital employee looking for a new job. She was Major Emily Bradford again. Combat surgeon, the woman who'd never walked away from a fight when lives were on the line. And this fight had just begun. The secure facility turned out to be a converted wing of an abandoned Veterans Affairs hospital on the outskirts of Boston. The building had been scheduled for demolition for 3 years, caught in the endless bureaucratic limbo that seemed to define how America treated its veterans. But someone in JSOC had seen its potential as a safe house. Reinforced walls, multiple exit routes, far enough from downtown to be defensible. Colonel Garrett led Emily through corridors that still smelled faintly of disinfectant and decay. Their footsteps echoed off cracked linoleum floors. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, some working, some dead. It was like walking through the ghost of what the VA system had become, a monument to good intentions and failed execution. We've been using this place for about 18 months, Garrett explained as they walked. Off-book operations, witness protection for military personnel, cases that are too sensitive for regular channels. How many people know about this location? Emily asked, her tactical training automatically assessing sight lines and defensive positions. 12, including you. All of them are people I trust with my life. Most of them have already proven I can. They stopped at a heavy steel door, guarded by 2 men in civilian clothes with military haircuts and the kind of watchful eyes that never really stopped scanning for threats. One of them nodded at Garrett and stepped aside. He's awake, the guard said. Been asking for her every 15 minutes. Garrett pushed open the door. The room beyond had been converted into a makeshift medical suite. Monitors, IV stands, equipment that looked like it had been procured from 3 different hospitals. But it was clean, functional. And in the bed at the center of it all, Sergeant Daniel Reeves was sitting up. He looked better than he had any right to look 6 hours after nearly bleeding to death on an operating table. Young, hard, the kind of lean, coiled strength that came from years of pushing the human body past what it was designed to endure. But his eyes were older than his 26 years. They held the particular awareness that came from seeing things most people only experienced in nightmares. Those eyes locked onto Emily the moment she entered the room. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, recognition, and something that looked almost like hope. Doc, he said, his voice rough but steady. They said you were coming. I wasn't sure I believed them. Emily walked to his bedside, her professional assessment already cataloging his condition. Color good, breathing unlabored. Pain managed but not oversedated. Whoever had been monitoring him knew what they were doing. How are you feeling, Sergeant? Like I got shot 4 times and then someone cut me open, he replied with a ghost of a smile. But alive. Thanks to you. Again. Again? Garrett asked from the doorway. Reeves glanced at the colonel, then back at Emily. Helmand Province, 2019. We were extracting a high-value target when the compound we were in took an RPG hit. Collapsed half the building. I was trapped under rubble with a piece of rebar through my leg. Doc Bradford was with a Ranger QRF team that came to pull us out. She performed field surgery under fire, removed the rebar, stopped the bleeding, kept me conscious long enough for the medevac. He looked at Emily with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. I never forgot, None of us did. You were a legend among the teams. The combat surgeon who could work miracles in the back of a helicopter going 150 miles an hour while getting shot at. Emily felt heat rising in her cheeks. I was doing my job. You were saving lives when most doctors would have been curled up in a ball crying, Reeves countered. There's a difference, no. Garrett cleared his throat. Well, that explains why you wouldn't talk to any of our medical staff. You were waiting for someone you knew you could trust. In my situation, trust is the only thing that matters, Reeves said. His expression hardened. Someone in your organization tried to kill me, Colonel. Someone who knew where I was, what I was doing. Someone with access to classified operational details. I know, Garrett said quietly. That's why we're here. That's why this facility. That's why Dr. Bradford. He pulled a chair over and sat down, his movements betraying his age for the first time. 62 years old, decades of service, and now hunting a traitor somewhere in his own ranks. Tell her, Garrett said to Reeves, everything. She needs to know what she's protecting and why. Reeves shifted carefully in the bed, his hand instinctively moving to his side where the surgical dressings covered Emily's work. He was silent for a long moment, organizing his thoughts. 6 months ago, I was approached by the Inspector General's office, he began. They'd been investigating irregularities in defense contracts, equipment that didn't meet specifications, medical supplies that were substandard, body armor that failed ballistic tests. At first, they thought it was just incompetence, bad quality control, the usual government contractor nonsense. He paused, accepting a cup of water from Emily, drank carefully. But then they started finding patterns. The same contractors winning bids despite lower quality. The same procurement officers approving substandard equipment. The same congressional committee members blocking investigations. And when they started adding up the numbers, they realized we weren't talking about incompetence. We were talking about systematic fraud. $3 billion over 8 years. Emily felt her stomach tighten. $3 billion. Minimum, Reeves said. Could be more. They stopped counting after that because the scope got too big. Too many people involved. Too many agencies compromised. Garrett leaned forward. The IG needed someone inside. Someone who could move through military circles without raising suspicion. Someone young enough to be underestimated. Reeves volunteered. I spent 3 months building a cover, Reeves continued. Got myself assigned to procurement oversight. Started asking questions. Following paper trails. And I found it. All of it. Names, dates, dollar amounts, shell companies, offshore accounts, the entire infrastructure of how they were stealing from the military. His jaw tightened. I found evidence that could put 47 people in federal prison. Defense contractors, Pentagon officials, 3 members of Congress, 2 generals, and someone very high up in JOC. The room went very quiet. How high, Emily asked. Garrett and Reeves exchanged a look. We don't know, Garrett admitted. That's the problem. Reeves was 3 days away from delivering his evidence to the IG when his mission parameters were suddenly changed. He was supposed to be doing routine equipment inspection at Fort Devens. Low profile, safe. Instead, someone altered his orders, sent him to a classified exercise location. Except there was no exercise. It was an ambush, Reeves said flatly. We rolled up expecting a standard training scenario. Instead, we got 8 armed contractors waiting for us. Military-grade weapons, night vision, coordinated tactics. They weren't trying to scare us. They were trying to eliminate everyone who knew about the operation. How many people were with you, Emily asked. 3, all dead, killed in the first 60 seconds. His voice was matter of fact, but Emily could see the muscle working in his jaw. The cost of survival. I got behind cover, started returning fire, took hits but kept moving. Made it to a civilian area. They couldn't finish me there. Too many witnesses. So they tracked you to the hospital. Emily said, the pieces falling into place. And when the surgical team saved you, they tried again. The nurse with the potassium. Who wasn't a nurse, Garrett added. Former military, dishonorable discharge 3 years ago, works as a freelance contractor now, which is a polite way of saying she kills people for money. He pulled out his tablet and showed Emily surveillance photos. The woman in scrubs, then the same woman without disguise. Hard eyes, military bearing. The look of someone who'd crossed lines most people didn't even know existed. She's not talking, Garrett said. Lawyered up within an hour, but we know who hired her. A procurement firm called Sentinel Defense Solutions, which is owned by a shell company, which is owned by another shell company. 6 layers deep before we lose the trail. But all of those companies have something in common, Reeves said. They all have contracts with the Department of Defense, and they all won their contracts through the same procurement officer, a man named Theodore Kane. Emily frowned. That name sounds familiar. It should, Garrett said grimly. General Theodore Kane, retired 2 years ago after 35 years of distinguished service. Now he's the CEO of Sentinel Defense Solutions, making $10 million a year helping defense contractors navigate the procurement process, which is a polite way of saying he's selling access to his former colleagues. He pulled up another photo. Emily recognized the face immediately. She'd seen it in military publications. At award ceremonies, General Kane had been a legend, a hero, someone young officers were told to emulate. Now he was something else entirely. Kane has connections everywhere, Garrett continued. Pentagon, Congress, private sector, and he's ruthless. We think he's the architect of the entire fraud scheme, but proving it is another matter entirely. Where's the evidence now, Emily asked. The files Reeves collected. Encrypted and backed up in 3 locations, Reeves said, but I'm the only one who can access them. Biometric authentication, retinal scan, voice recognition. If I die, the evidence dies with me. Which is why they're so desperate to kill you, Emily said. You're not just a witness, you're the key to the entire case. Exactly. Garrett stood and walked to the window. Outside, Emily could see the perimeter guards, the SUVs arranged in defensive positions, the whole operation humming with quiet, lethal efficiency. We need time, Garrett said. Time to verify the evidence. Time to figure out who in my chain of command is compromised. Time to build a case that can't be dismissed or buried. And we need Reeves alive while we do it. He turned back to Emily. That's where you come in. Keep him stable, monitor his recovery, and if anyone tries to finish what they started, you'll be the first line of defense. Emily looked at Reeves at the monitors tracking his vital signs, at the web of tubes and wires connecting him to machines that were keeping careful track of his survival. What about the hospital? She asked. Boston Memorial, the director who fired me. Does she know about any of this? Garrett's expression darkened. Victoria Blackwood, 55 years old, hospital director for 8 years. And according to our investigation, she's on Kane's payroll. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. What? We've been tracking Sentinel Defense Solutions financial records for 3 months, Garrett explained. Blackwood has received over $400,000 in consulting fees in the past 2 years. In exchange, she's been providing Kane's people with access to the hospital, patient records, security protocols, staff schedules. Emily felt her anger rising. She's been helping them hunt military personnel. Not just hunt, eliminate. Garrett pulled up more files, more names, more faces. 6 veterans have died mysteriously at Boston Memorial in the past 18 months. All of them died from medical complications that look natural. Overdoses, allergic reactions, equipment failures. But all of them happened during Blackwood's tenure, and all of them were receiving treatment for injuries or conditions related to their military service. He showed her the files. Young men and women, lives cut short, each death ruled accidental or natural, each investigation closed without finding anything suspicious. Kane's been systematically eliminating anyone who might have information about the fraud, Garrett said. Veterans who worked in procurement, soldiers who asked too many questions, anyone who could potentially be a witness. And Blackwood gave him the perfect killing ground, a hospital, where deaths don't raise suspicion. Emily felt sick. And I've been working there for 8 months, walking those hallways, treating patients, while people were being murdered right under my nose. You couldn't have known, Reeves said quietly. None of us did. That's why Kane's gotten away with it for so long. He's patient, careful, and he has resources most criminals could only dream about. Emily forced herself to focus. So what's the plan? How do we keep Reeves alive and take down Kane? First, we verify the evidence, Garrett said. Reeves downloads the files, we authenticate them, make sure they'll hold up in court. That takes approximately 48 hours with our forensic team. Second, we identify the leak in JSOC, he continued. Figure out who's feeding Kane information. Without that, we're operating blind. And third, Reeves added, we keep me breathing long enough to testify, which is where you come in, Doc. Emily nodded slowly. 48 hours. I can keep you stable for 48 hours. It won't be easy, Garrett warned. Kane knows Reeves survived. He knows we've moved him. He'll be looking for this location. And when he finds it, he'll come with everything he has. How many people can you spare for security? Emily asked. Right now, 12. All special operations. All people I trust absolutely. But Kane has access to private military contractors, dozens of them. Maybe hundreds if he's desperate enough. Emily did the math in her head. 12 against dozens. In a building with too many entry points and not enough defensive positions. The numbers weren't good. We need to make this place defensible, she said. Choke points, overlapping fields of fire, early warning systems. And we need a fallback plan if they breach the perimeter. Garrett smiled slightly. You've been thinking about this tactically. I spent 6 years in combat zones, Emily replied. You don't survive that without learning how to think defensively. This building has good bones, but we need to reinforce it. And we need to do it fast. Over the next 3 hours, Emily worked with Garrett's security team to transform the abandoned VA hospital into something resembling a fortress. They barricaded secondary entrances, set up surveillance cameras at every approach, positioned armed guards at strategic locations. Emily found herself slipping back into military thinking, assessing angles, calculating response times, identifying vulnerabilities. It felt disturbingly natural, like putting on an old uniform that still fit perfectly despite years in storage. While she worked, her mind kept returning to Victoria Blackwood, the woman who'd fired her, the woman who'd been so concerned about protocol and liability and maintaining order, the woman who'd been facilitating murder. How many people had died because Blackwood valued money more than the lives of veterans she was supposed to serve? How many families had been destroyed? How many soldiers who'd survived combat had been killed in the place they thought was safe? By late afternoon, Reeves needed rest. The surgery and stress were taking their toll. Emily checked his vitals, adjusted his pain medication, and made sure the monitors were properly calibrated. Professional, efficient, but underneath the clinical exterior, she was furious. Garrett found her in the makeshift supply room taking inventory of medical equipment. You're angry, he observed. You're perceptive, Emily replied without looking up from her clipboard. Talk to me. Emily set down the clipboard and turned to face him. I left the military because I was tired of the lies, tired of the politics, tired of watching good people die while bureaucrats played their games. I thought civilian medicine would be different. Clean, honest, just medicine. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I was wrong. The corruption just wears a different uniform. Garrett was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, most hospitals aren't like Boston Memorial. Most directors aren't like Blackwood. But some are, and we never know which ones until it's too late. No, Garrett agreed, we don't. That's why people like you matter. People who give a damn. People who'll break the rules when the rules are wrong. Emily looked at him, really looked. She saw the weight he was carrying, the knowledge that someone in his command structure had betrayed everything they were supposed to stand for. The responsibility of protecting Reeves while hunting a traitor. How do you do it, she asked. How do you keep going when you know the system is broken? Because the alternative is worse, Garrett said simply. If the good people quit, if they walk away because they're tired or angry or disillusioned, then the bad people win by default. Kane and people like him, they're counting on us to give up, to decide it's not worth the fight. He moved closer, his voice dropping. But here's what they don't understand. People like you, like Reeves, like the 12 operators I have guarding this building. We don't quit. We don't walk away. We might get tired. We might get angry. But we don't stop fighting. Because that's who we are. Emily felt something shift inside her. A decision crystallizing. I want more than 48 hours. What do you mean? I mean, I want to help take Kane down, not just keep Reeves alive. I want to be part of bringing him to justice. Blackwood, too. Everyone involved in this. Garrett studied her face. That could be dangerous. Kane won't hesitate to target anyone who threatens him. I know. I don't care. These people have been killing veterans. My brothers and sisters. People I served with. People I bled for. Her voice was steel. I want them to pay for what they've done. A slow smile spread across Garrett's face. Then welcome to the team, Major Bradford, because we're going to need all the help we can get. That evening, Emily sat with Reeves while he worked on downloading and decrypting his evidence files. The process was slow, methodical. Each file had to be carefully extracted and verified. But gradually a picture emerged. Names, dates, financial transactions, shell companies. The entire architecture of Kane's fraud scheme laid out in meticulous detail. Reeves had been thorough, every claim backed by documentation, Every transaction traced through multiple sources. This is damning, Emily said, scrolling through the files on the secure laptop Garrett had provided. How did you get all this patience, Reeves replied, and a willingness to spend 6 months pretending to be dumber than I am? Kane's people were arrogant. They didn't think some junior SEAL could possibly understand the complexity of their operations. So they got careless, left digital trails, had conversations they shouldn't have had, and I documented everything. He pulled up a particularly damaging file. Email exchanges between Kane and a Pentagon procurement officer, discussing how to rig bids, how to falsify quality reports, how to silence whistleblowers. This one email alone is worth 20 years in federal prison, Reeves said, and I have 300 more just like it. But as impressive as the evidence was, Emily couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Something was bothering her, a detail that didn't quite fit. Reeves, she said slowly, when you were shot, where exactly were you? He frowned. Roxbury, outside a convenience store. Why, what were you doing there? Picking up supplies, water, energy bars, basic stuff before heading to the safe house. Emily pulled up the incident report Garrett had given her. Read it carefully. The police report says there were witnesses, a store clerk, 2 customers. They all gave statements saying you interrupted a robbery in progress. That's what happened, Reeves confirmed. I walked in, saw a guy with a gun threatening the clerk, and I intervened, got shot in the process. Did you recognize the shooter? Reeves hesitated. No, but he was professional, military bearing, controlled movements, even when things went wrong. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Reeves, what if it wasn't a random robbery? What if the whole thing was staged to kill you in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion? Reeves went very still. A false flag operation. Think about it. You were 3 days away from delivering your evidence. Kane knows you're building a case, but he can't just disappear you. Too obvious. So instead, he sets up a scenario where your death looks random. A convenience store robbery gone wrong. Tragic, but not suspicious. But I survived, Reeves said slowly, which forced him to try again at the hospital. Where he had Blackwood's cooperation, Emily continued. Access to your location, your medical records, your room number. Everything he needed to finish what the staged robbery didn't accomplish. They sat in silence, the implications sinking in. We need to tell Garrett, Emily said finally. But before she could move, alarms started screaming throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Garrett's voice came over the intercom system, calm but urgent. This is not a drill. We have multiple vehicles approaching from the East Access Road. All personnel to defensive positions. Medical secure the package and prepare for possible evacuation. Emily's training took over instantly. She moved to Reeves's bedside, already running through emergency protocols. Can you move? If I have to. You have to. She disconnected the non-essential monitoring equipment, leaving only the portable IV. We need to get you to the fallback position. Now. 2 of Garrett's operators burst into the room. Young, hard, the kind of men who'd probably been doing this kind of work since they were old enough to hold a rifle. Doc, we need to move, one of them said. Colonel's orders. Get the package to the secondary location. The secondary location turned out to be a reinforced room in the basement. Concrete walls, a single reinforced door, no windows. It had probably been a record storage room back when this was a functioning hospital. Now it was a bunker. They got Reeves settled just as the sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere above them. Not the rapid chatter of small arms, something heavier, more sustained. The kind of firefight that meant serious opposition. Emily checked her watch. 45 minutes since Garrett had brought her here. Kane had found them in less than an hour. The operator guarding their door spoke into his radio, listening to reports from the teams above. His face was professionally neutral, but Emily could read the tension in his shoulders. How bad, she asked. Bad enough. At least 20 hostiles. Professional gear. Coordinated assault. They're not trying to breach. They're trying to overrun. More gunfire. Closer now. The building shook slightly. Explosives. Reeves sat up in his portable bed, his face pale but determined. Doc, if they breach this room, you need to run. Not leaving you. Emily. He used her first name deliberately. You're a civilian now. You don't have to die for this. Emily looked at him, at this young man who'd volunteered to bring down a corrupt system, who'd watched his team die, who'd been shot and nearly killed twice in one day, who was still fighting. Neither do you, she said, so let's make sure neither of us does. The gunfire above them intensified. Garrett's voice came over the radio that the operator carried. All teams fall back to secondary positions. I repeat, fall back. They're pushing through the east wing. The operator tensed. Colonel, we're secure in the basement. The package is safe. Copy that. Hold position. We're going to make them fight for every inch. For the next 20 minutes, Emily listened to the battle raging above them. The sound of American operators fighting off a private army. Good guys versus bad guys, except the lines had gotten so blurred, she wasn't sure anyone could tell the difference anymore. Then gradually the gunfire diminished, slowed, stopped. Emily held her breath waiting. Was it over? Had Garrett's team won, or had Kane's people just been regrouping? The radio crackled. Medical, this is Garrett. We've pushed them back. Casualties are contained. You can bring the package back up. The operator exhaled slowly. Roger that, Colonel. Moving now. They brought Reeves back to his room through corridors that now bore the evidence of combat. Bullet holes in walls, blood on floors. Shell casings scattered like brass confetti. 3 of Garrett's operators were wounded, none critically, but they'd need medical attention. Emily went to work, her battlefield surgery skills coming back like riding a bicycle. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient. Move to the next one. Garrett found her 40 minutes later, finishing stitches on a young operator who'd taken a grazing shot to the shoulder. They'll be back, Garrett said without preamble. This was a probing attack, testing our defenses. Next time they'll come harder. Emily tied off the final suture and cleaned her hands. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Kane knows where we are now. He knows our strength, and he knows we can't hold indefinitely. Garrett looked exhausted, decades of service written in every line of his face. I'm bringing in reinforcements, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning at the earliest. Can we last that long? We have to. He paused, then added, unless you want to evacuate, take Reeves and run. Try to find another location. Where Kane will just track us down again, Emily said. No, we make our stand here. We hold for 48 hours. And then we make sure every person involved in this corruption spends the rest of their life in a cell. Garrett smiled grimly. You sound like a soldier. I am a soldier, Emily replied. I just forgot it for a while. She went back to Reeves's room where he was resting but not sleeping. His eyes tracked her as she entered. Heard you patched up the team, he said. It's what I do. Emily checked his vitals, still stable. The surgery was holding. His body was healing despite the stress. Emily, Reeves said quietly, when this is over, when Kane is in prison and Blackwood is finished, what are you going to do? Emily considered the question. 24 hours ago, she'd been a fired hospital nurse with no prospects and no direction. Now she was back in a war zone protecting a witness, fighting corruption. I have no idea, she admitted. Maybe I'll start over. Find another hospital. Try again. Or maybe you'll do what you're actually good at, Reeves suggested. Combat medicine, teaching, training the next generation of medics who will deploy to the same places we did. Emily looked at him. That sounds like a job offer. It's a suggestion, because watching you work today, watching you adapt and fight and save lives under pressure, I was reminded of something important. He met her eyes. People like us, we're not meant for normal. We're meant for this, the hard stuff, the impossible stuff, the things that need doing when everything's on fire and nobody else can do them. Before Emily could respond, the alarm started screaming again, but this time something was different. Not the controlled urgency of defensive positions. This was panic, chaos. Something had gone very, very wrong. Garrett burst through the door, his face ashen. We have a problem, he said, a big one. Kane didn't just find our location. He found something else. He pulled up his tablet, showing them surveillance footage from Boston Memorial Hospital. Emily's breath caught. The entire building was surrounded by police. FBI, federal marshals. Not attacking, securing. What's happening? Emily asked. Kane made his move, Garrett said grimly. He's filed federal charges against you. Murder, conspiracy, assault on a federal officer. He's claiming you kidnapped Reeves, that you're part of a radical group targeting military personnel, that tonight's attack was you trying to kill the people who came to rescue him. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. That's insane. None of that is true. Doesn't matter. He has Blackwood backing his story, hospital records showing you were fired for violent behavior. Security footage he's doctored to make it look like you forced Reeves to come with you. Witness statements from people on his payroll. Garrett's face was stone. As of 20 minutes ago, Emily Bradford, you're the most wanted fugitive in Massachusetts, and every law enforcement agency in the state is looking for you. The room went silent except for the quiet beeping of Reeves's monitors. Kane hadn't just found their location. He'd changed the entire game, turned Emily from protector into predator, from doctor into criminal. And now she had to figure out how to prove her innocence while keeping Reeves alive and bringing down a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the military and government. The clock was ticking. Kane was closing in, and Emily Bradford had just run out of places to hide. The weight of being hunted settled over Emily like a physical thing. 24 hours ago, she'd been a nurse trying to rebuild a civilian life. Now she was a federal fugitive with her face plastered across every news channel in New England. Garrett paced the small room like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear. Emily could hear fragments of his conversation. Legal terms, jurisdictional questions, the careful dance of someone trying to navigate a system that had been weaponized against them. He ended the call and turned to face them, his expression grim. "Kane's playing this perfectly," Garrett said. "He's got the district attorney convinced you're dangerous. He's got federal marshals believing you kidnapped a wounded serviceman. He's even got the media running stories about a rogue military doctor who went off the rails after leaving the service." Emily felt her hands curling into fists. "Let me guess. PTSD? Violent tendencies? Couldn't adjust to civilian life? All of the above, plus financial problems, relationship issues, a drinking problem you don't actually have. He's building a profile that makes you look unstable, dangerous, someone who snapped under pressure and became exactly the kind of threat she was trained to eliminate." "It's textbook character assassination," Reeves added from his bed. "Make the witness look unreliable before they can testify. Destroy their credibility so thoroughly that nothing they say matters anymore." Emily walked to the window, careful to stay out of sight. Outside, the November darkness was complete. Somewhere in that darkness, Kane's people were planning their next move, and now they had law enforcement on their side. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "Agreed," Garrett replied. "Kane knows this location. He's already hit us once. Next time he'll come with everything he has. And now he can call in official backup if he needs it." "Where do we go?" Emily asked. "Somewhere Kane won't think to look. Somewhere off the grid. Somewhere we can finish authenticating the evidence and figure out how to clear your name." Garrett pulled up a map on his tablet. "I have a place, a hunting cabin in New Hampshire. Belongs to my brother. No official connection to me or JSOC. No paper trail. Kane shouldn't be able to trace it." "Shouldn't isn't the same as can't," Reeves pointed out. "No, it's not, but it's the best option we have right now." Garrett looked at Emily. "I need to know you're in this, all the way, because once we move, there's no backing out. You'll be a fugitive until we can prove Kane set you up. That could take days, weeks, maybe longer." Emily thought about her small apartment in Cambridge, her few possessions, the quiet, ordinary life she'd been trying to build. All of it gone now, burned to ash by a corrupt general and a hospital director who valued profit over human life. "I'm in," she said. "All the way." Garrett nodded. "Then we move in 30 minutes. Grab what you need. Travel light. Once we're mobile, we're vulnerable, partner." The next 30 minutes were controlled chaos. Garrett's operators packed equipment with military efficiency, medical supplies, communications gear, weapons. The tools of survival and warfare compressed into packs and cases that could be moved quickly. Emily worked with Reeves, preparing him for transport. He was stronger than he'd been 12 hours ago, but moving him was still risky. The surgery was holding, but any significant trauma could tear the repair she'd made. "How much can you move?" she asked, checking his vitals one more time. "As much as I need to," Reeves replied. His jaw was set with the kind of determination that had probably gotten him through SEAL training and kept him alive through multiple combat deployments. "I'm not slowing us down. You're recovering from major surgery. You're allowed to slow down. Not with Kane hunting us." He met her eyes. "I'll keep up, I promise." And they loaded into 3 unmarked vehicles at midnight, civilian SUVs that wouldn't draw attention. Garrett had already sent half his team ahead to secure the cabin and establish a perimeter. The rest traveled with Emily and Reeves, forming a protective convoy. Emily sat in the back seat with Reeves monitoring his condition. His color was good, breathing steady, but she could see the pain medication wearing off, the tightness around his eyes, the way he held himself too still. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "Scale of 1 to 10. 5, he lied. "Try again. 7, maybe 8, he grimaced. "But I can handle it, idiot." Emily pulled out the medication kit Garrett had provided. "You don't have to handle it, as that's what these are for." "I need to stay alert. Can't do that if I'm drugged." "You also can't fight if you're too damaged to move. Let me do my job, Sergeant." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. She administered a careful dose. Enough to manage the pain, not enough to compromise his awareness. The balance was delicate, but it was something she'd done hundreds of times in field conditions. The drive to New Hampshire took 3 hours. They avoided highways stuck to back roads, changed routes twice to make sure they weren't being followed. Standard counter-surveillance protocols that felt both familiar and surreal in the context of running from American law enforcement. The cabin turned out to be more substantial than Emily had expected. Not a rustic shack, but a proper structure. 2 stories, stone fireplace, solar panels on the roof. The kind of place someone had built for serious off-grid living. Garrett's advance team had already secured the perimeter and done a sweep for surveillance devices. Clear, at least for now. They got Reeves settled in a bedroom on the ground floor. Medical equipment set up, monitors calibrated. Emily worked with mechanical efficiency, her hands steady despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Get some rest, Garrett said from the doorway. We've got watch rotation covered. You've been going for almost 24 hours straight. So have you. I'm used to it. You're a doctor, not an operator. You need sleep to function. Emily wanted to argue, but her body was already betraying her. The adrenaline crash hitting hard. 2 hours, she said. Then wake me. I need to check Reeves every 4 hours minimum. Deal. She collapsed onto a couch in the cabin's main room, pulled a blanket over herself, and despite everything, despite the impossibility of their situation, she was asleep within minutes. She dreamed of Afghanistan, of operating rooms that smelled like blood and sand, of young soldiers dying on tables while she fought to save them, of the helpless rage that came from knowing that no matter how skilled she was, no matter how hard she fought, some of them wouldn't make it. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder gently. Garrett's face swam into focus. 4 hours, he said. I let you sleep longer. You needed it. Emily sat up, her body protesting. Reeves, stable. One of my medics has been monitoring, but he's been asking for you. She found Reeves awake, staring at the ceiling. He turned his head when she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. What's wrong? She asked. Turn on the news, he said quietly. Emily grabbed the remote, flipping to a news channel. Her own face filled the screen. Not a flattering photo, a screenshot from hospital security footage. Grainy, unflattering. The kind of image that made people look guilty. The news anchor's voice was grave, professional, damning. The FBI has escalated their search for Dr. Emily Bradford, wanted in connection with the kidnapping of Navy SEAL Daniel Reeves and the deaths of 3 federal agents killed in last night's assault on a secure facility outside Boston. Emily felt her stomach drop. 3 agents. Kane's people, Reeves said, the contractors he sent to kill me, but he's claiming they were legitimate federal agents attempting a rescue operation. The news continued. Bradford, a former military surgeon discharged under controversial circumstances, is considered armed and extremely dangerous. Federal authorities believe she may be suffering from severe PTSD and should not be approached by civilians. They showed more footage. Crime scene photos from the VA hospital. Bodies covered with sheets, blood on floors. The aftermath of the firefight presented as a massacre. Authorities are also seeking Colonel James Garrett, a JSOC officer believed to be aiding Bradford. Anyone with information about their whereabouts should contact the FBI immediately. Emily turned off the television, feeling sick. He killed his own people, just to make me look like a murderer. It's brilliant, Reeves said bitterly. Sociopathic, but brilliant. Now every law enforcement agency in the country is hunting you. Every news outlet is running your face. Every civilian who sees you will call it in. He's turned the entire system into his weapon. Garrett appeared in the doorway. We've got another problem, the evidence. Reeves's files. Kane's lawyers have gotten a federal judge to issue a warrant claiming the files were obtained illegally. Any evidence derived from them will be inadmissible in court. On what grounds? Emily demanded. They're claiming Reeves exceeded his authority, that his investigation was unauthorized, that he obtained classified information through illegal means. Garrett's face was stone. It's bullshit, complete bullshit. But the judge bought it, or Kane bought the judge. Either way, the evidence we've been protecting is legally worthless. The room fell silent, the weight of their situation crushing down on all of them. So we have nothing, Emily said finally. The evidence is inadmissible. I'm wanted for murder. You're wanted for aiding a fugitive. Kane wins. Not nothing, Reeves said. He sat up carefully, wincing but determined. We still have the evidence, and we still have the truth. We just need a different way to get it out there. What are you suggesting? Garrett asked. We go public. All of it. Every file, every email, every transaction. We release it to the press, to Congress, to every news outlet that will listen. Make it so public that Kane can't bury it. That's risky, Garrett warned. Once that information is out there, it's out there. No control over how it's used or who gets caught in the crossfire. Good, Reeves said. Let everyone see what Kane's been doing. Let this public decide if they're okay with $3 billion being stolen from the military. Let Congress explain why they've been blocking investigations. Let the Pentagon explain why they've been protecting contractors who provide substandard equipment that gets soldiers killed. Emily felt something shifting inside her, a decision crystallizing. He's right, we can't win by playing Kane's game. He owns the game. The judges, the system, we need to change the rules. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, we go public. But we do it smart. We need a journalist, someone with credibility, someone Kane can't intimidate or buy off. I know someone, Reeves said. Sarah Mitchell, investigative reporter for the Washington Post. She's been trying to get information on defense contract fraud for 2 years. She's relentless, incorruptible, and she hates Kane. Personal history, Garrett asked. Her brother was killed in Afghanistan, IED. But the body armor he was wearing failed. Turned out it was substandard equipment provided by one of Kane's contractors. Sarah's been hunting Kane ever since. That's personal enough to be motivated, but professional enough to be credible, Emily said. How do we contact her without Kane tracking the communication? Leave that to me, Garrett said. I've got secure channels, but it'll take time to establish contact and verify her identity. At least 12 hours. We don't have 12 hours, Emily said. Kane's going to figure out we're in New Hampshire. This cabin won't stay secret forever. Then we buy ourselves time, Garrett replied. We make Kane think we're somewhere else. Create a diversion. Pull his resources away from the real location. Over the next 2 hours they planned. Garrett's team would create digital footprints suggesting Emily and Reeves were heading north into Maine. Credit card transactions, cell phone pings, security camera footage of people matching their descriptions. Enough breadcrumbs to send Kane's people chasing shadows. Meanwhile, Emily would stay with Reeves at the cabin maintaining radio silence. Invisible. Waiting for Sarah Mitchell to make contact. It was a gamble. Everything was a gamble now. But it was the only play they had left. Garrett's team deployed at dawn, 6 operators in 2 vehicles armed with weapons and false identification. They'd lead Kane's people on a chase through rural Maine, buying time for Emily and Reeves to make contact with the reporter. That left Emily alone with Reeves and 2 operators for security, minimal presence, maximum vulnerability. You should have gone with them, Reeves said as Emily checked his dressings. You're the one Kane really wants. Which is exactly why I stayed. If he captures me, you're the one with the evidence. The mission continues. That's a military answer. I'm a military person. Emily finished the dressing change and updated his medication. How's the pain? Manageable? How's the stress? Emily laughed despite herself. Less manageable, but I'll survive. You know, when I woke up on that operating table and saw you, I thought I was hallucinating. Like my brain had conjured you up because I needed a miracle, and you were the person who represented miracles in my mind. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just a surgeon who got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You saved me because you're exceptional at what you do, and Kane's trying to destroy you because he's terrified of what happens when exceptional people refuse to be intimidated. Emily sat down beside the bed. You're very philosophical for someone who got shot multiple times. Pain clarifies the mind. He looked at her seriously. When this is over, when Kane's in prison and you're cleared, what are you going to do? Honestly, I have no idea. My medical license will probably be revoked. My reputation destroyed. I'll be lucky if I can get a job anywhere in healthcare. Or, Reeves said carefully, you could do something different. Something that needs someone with your skills and your refusal to back down from a fight. Such as, there's a program, military medical training for special operations. They're always looking for experienced combat surgeons to train the next generation. People who can teach young medics how to operate under fire, how to make life or death decisions in seconds, how to save lives when everything's falling apart. Emily felt something stirring. Not quite hope, but something close. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things, including how wrong it is that someone like you gets pushed out of medicine because you were too good at your job, Because you made the right call instead of the safe call. Before Emily could respond, one of the security operators appeared in the doorway. Doc, Colonel Garrett on the secure line. Says it's urgent. Emily took the phone. What's wrong? Garrett's voice was tight. Mitchell made contact. She's interested. Very interested. But she wants verification. She wants to meet face to face. She wants to see Reeves alive and the evidence authenticated. Where? Boston. Tomorrow night. She's already in the city covering another story. It's perfect timing. Emily felt her pulse quicken. Boston is the worst possible place. Every federal agent in New England is looking for us there. Which is why Kane won't expect us to go back. He thinks we're running. That we'll keep running until he corners us. We do the opposite. We walk right back into his territory. Meet with Mitchell. Give her everything. And then we disappear before Kane realizes what happened. Emily looked at Reeves, who'd been listening to the conversation. He nodded slowly. It's crazy, Emily said. It's suicide. It's the mission, Garrett replied. And it's our only shot. Are you in... Emily closed her eyes. Thought about the 6 veterans who died at Boston Memorial. Thought about the soldiers in Afghanistan who died because their equipment failed. Thought about Victoria Blackwood's cold eyes as she fired her for saving a life. I'm in, she said. Tell Mitchell we'll be there. The next 20 hours were a blur of preparation. Garrett's team returned from their main diversion. Exhausted but successful. Kane's people had taken the bait. Dozens of contractors were now searching the wrong state for targets that didn't exist. They planned the Boston operation with military precision. Multiple vehicles, staggered departure times, backup routes, emergency extraction protocols, everything they could think of to maximize their chances of survival. Reeves was the weak link. He was healing, but he was still recovering from major surgery. Moving him was risky, but leaving him behind was riskier. If Kane found the cabin while they were gone, Reeves would be defenseless. I can handle it, Reeves insisted as Emily ran through final medical checks. I've operated on worse. You've also been shot 4 times in the last 48 hours. Your definition of handling it might be slightly skewed. Doc, I've been through Bud/S. I've done Hell Week. I've completed missions with broken bones and infections and injuries that would have hospitalized most people. This is just pain. Pain I can manage. Emily wanted to argue, but she recognized that look in his eyes. The absolute determination of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough. Fine, she said, but you follow my protocols. You tell me immediately if something feels wrong, and if I say we abort, we abort. No arguments. Deal. They left the cabin at dusk, 3 vehicles moving in careful coordination. Emily rode with Reeves and 2 operators. Garrett led in another vehicle. The third provided rear security. The drive back to Boston felt surreal. They were driving toward danger. Toward the place where Emily was most wanted. Where Kane had the most resources. Where everything could go catastrophically wrong. But they were also driving toward truth. Toward justice. Toward the possibility of exposing corruption so deep and widespread that it had rotted the foundations of the military Emily had served. Sarah Mitchell had chosen a location that was both public and defensible. A parking garage downtown. Multiple exits, good sight lines, enough civilian traffic to discourage an obvious attack. Garrett's team arrived first, swept the location, confirmed it was clean. Then Emily and Reeves moved in, flanked by operators who looked like private security. Mitchell was waiting by her car on the 3rd level, 42 years old, short dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked exactly like someone who'd spent years investigating corruption and learned to spot lies instantly. Dr. Bradford, she said, extending her hand. Sergeant Reeves, thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for being willing to listen, Emily replied. Not many reporters would take the risk. This story is worth the risk. Mitchell pulled out a recording device. I need your permission to record this conversation. And I need you to understand that once I publish this story, there's no taking it back. Your lives will change. Permanently. They've already changed, Reeves said. Kane made sure of that. Now we're just trying to make sure he doesn't get away with it. For the next hour, they walked Mitchell through everything. The fraud, the deaths, the evidence. Reeves transferred encrypted files to secure drives while Emily explained the medical murders at Boston Memorial. Garrett provided documentation of Kane's contractor network and the federal corruption enabling it. Mitchell asked sharp questions, verified facts, cross-referenced documents. She was thorough, professional, and clearly horrified by what she was learning. "This is bigger than I imagined," she said finally. "This isn't just defense contract fraud. This is systematic corruption across multiple agencies. Pentagon, Congress, federal judiciary. Kane built an entire infrastructure of protection." "Can you publish it?" Emily asked. "All of it. I can, I will. It'll be the biggest story of my career. Probably the biggest military corruption story in decades." Mitchell met Emily's eyes. "But you need to understand, publishing this will make you a hero to some people and a target to others. Kane has allies, powerful allies. They'll come after you legally, professionally, maybe physically." "They're already coming after us," Reeves pointed out. "At least this way the truth is out there." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I'll need 48 hours to verify everything and write the story. Can you stay hidden that long?" "We'll manage," Garrett said. "One more thing," Mitchell added. "The charges against Dr. Bradford. The federal warrant that I have contacts in the FBI, good people who aren't on Kane's payroll. Once this story breaks, once the evidence is public, I can get them to take another look at the case. The truth about what really happened." Emily felt something loosening in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. "You can clear my name. I can give you a fighting chance. The rest depends on how the evidence holds up and whether Kane's network collapses fast enough. But yes, I think we can clear your name." They were preparing to leave when Emily's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dr. Bradford, we need to talk. Come alone, or more people die. Victoria Blackwood." Emily showed the message to Garrett. His face went hard. "It's a trap." "Obviously. But what if it's not? What if Blackwood wants to flip? Turn on Kane, she might have information we need. Or she might be luring you into an ambush." Emily looked at the address Blackwood had sent. A construction site on the waterfront. Abandoned, isolated, perfect for a trap. "I have to go," Emily said. "Absolutely not." "Garrett, if there's any chance Blackwood can give us something that strengthens the case against Kane, we have to take it. Besides, she specifically said to come alone. If I show up with a team, she'll run. Then let her run." "No," Emily's voice was steel. "I want to look her in the eye. I want to hear her justify what she's done. And if it is a trap, if Kane is there waiting, then at least we'll know for sure." Garrett and Reeves both started to argue. Emily held up her hand. "I'm going. You can either help me plan it smart, or I can go in blind. Your choice." 30 minutes later, Emily walked into the construction site alone. Or apparently alone. In reality, Garrett's team had positioned themselves at every exit. Snipers on surrounding buildings. Operators ready to move the instant things went wrong. But Emily walked in by herself, her hands visible, no weapons. Blackwood had been specific about that. She found the hospital director on the top floor of the unfinished building, standing by the edge, looking out over the dark water. She turned when Emily approached. Victoria Blackwood looked different, smaller somehow. The cold confidence that had defined her was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Dr. Bradford," she said, "you came. You asked me to, though I'm still not sure why." Blackwood laughed bitterly. "Because I'm going today. Either Kane kills me for becoming a liability, or I go to prison and someone Kane paid kills me there. Either way, I'm finished. You could have thought about that before you helped murder veterans." "You think I don't know that?" Blackwood's voice cracked. "You think I don't see their faces every night? 6 people. 6 veterans who came to my hospital for help, and I let them be killed." "Why do I?" Emily asked. "And why did you do it?" "Money at first. Kane offered me a fortune, consulting fees, stock options, a retirement package that would set me up for life. And all I had to do was look the other way, ignore some irregularities, provide access to a few patient records." She turned back to the water. "I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I wasn't really hurting anyone, that the hospital needed the funding and Kane's connections helped secure grants. I rationalized it, justified it, convinced myself I was doing the right thing. And then people started dying." "And then people started dying," Blackwood agreed. "And by then it was too late. Kane had evidence of my involvement. He owned me, so I kept helping, kept providing access, kept signing off on death certificates. And every night I'd go home and drink until I couldn't see their faces anymore." Emily felt disgust warring with something that might have been pity. "So why am I here? Confession isn't going to save you." "I'm not looking for salvation. I'm looking for revenge." Blackwood pulled out a tablet from her bag. "Kane thinks I'm stupid, that I just followed orders without keeping records. But I documented everything. Every payment, every communication, every time he gave me instructions about which patients to target. She held out the tablet. This is my insurance policy. Everything Kane did with my testimony to back it up. Enough to put him away for life. Multiple life sentences. Emily took the tablet, her hands shaking slightly. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the only person who gives a damn about those veterans. The only one who fought for them. The only one who didn't look the other way when it mattered. Blackwood's voice was hollow. I can't undo what I did. But maybe this helps. Maybe this makes some small difference. Emily scrolled through the files. Financial records, emails, text messages, audio recordings. Blackwood had been thorough, almost obsessively so. This is everything, Emily breathed. This is enough to... The gunshot was almost quiet, suppressed, professional. Blackwood staggered backward, a red flower blooming on her chest. Her eyes went wide with shock. She looked down at the wound, then back at Emily. Kane, she whispered. He knew. He always knows. She collapsed. Emily dove for cover as more shots rang out. Concrete exploded around her. Professional fire. Multiple shooters. Garrett's voice crackled in her hidden earpiece. We're coming. Hold position. But Emily couldn't hold position. She was pinned down, 3 shooters at least, all of them with angles on her location. If she stayed, she died. She ran, zigzagging across the open floor, bullets chasing her. She made it to a stairwell just as Garrett's team engaged, the sound of gunfire erupting from multiple locations. Emily kept running, downstairs, through unfinished rooms, clutching Blackwood's tablet like it was the only thing that mattered. Because it was. This was the evidence, the proof, the key to bringing Kane down. She burst out of the building at ground level, gasping for air. One of Garrett's operators grabbed her, pulling her toward an armored vehicle. Go, he shouted. They were moving before Emily had fully processed what happened. The vehicle accelerated hard, taking corners at speeds that threw her against the door. Blackwood, she asked. The operator shook his head. Didn't make it. 2 shooters on the roof. They were waiting for her to hand over the evidence. Kill her, kill you, recover the files. But they didn't recover them, Emily said, holding up the tablet. We have everything. Back at the safe house, they transferred Blackwood's files to Sarah Mitchell's secure server. The reporter worked through the night, verifying, cross-referencing, building the story that would end General Theodore Kane. Emily sat with Reeves, both of them too wired to sleep, watching Mitchell work, watching the case against Kane solidify with every document she authenticated. Blackwood saved us, Reeves said quietly. In the end, she did the right thing. She got 6 veterans killed first, Emily replied. The right thing doesn't erase that. No, but it matters that she tried. At dawn, Sarah Mitchell looked up from her laptop. Her eyes were bright with exhaustion and triumph. I'm ready, she said. The story runs in 90 minutes. Front page, digital and print. Everything. Kane, the contractors, the Pentagon officials, the congressional cover-up, all of it. What about Bradford? Garrett asked. The charges. I've got my FBI contacts ready. The moment this story goes live, they're opening a new investigation. Independent review of the evidence. They'll discover that Kane falsified the reports about the federal agents, that he doctored the security footage, that Emily was protecting a witness, not kidnapping him. Mitchell looked at Emily. It won't be instant. There will be hearings, questions, scrutiny, but the truth will come out, and when it does, you'll be cleared. Emily felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. Thank you. Don't thank me. You gave me the story of a lifetime. I should be thanking you. The story broke at 7 a.m. Eastern. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Front page of the Washington Post, top story on every news channel, social media exploding with reactions. By noon, 3 members of Congress had resigned. By 2 p.m., the Secretary of Defense had called for a complete review of all procurement contracts. By 4 p.m., federal marshals had arrested General Theodore Kane at his office in Virginia. Emily watched it unfold on television, hardly able to believe it was real. We did it, Reeves said beside her. He looked exhausted, pale, but alive. We actually did it. Garrett got the call at 6 p.m. FBI wanted to meet with Emily, not to arrest her, to take her statement, to officially clear her of all charges. It's over, he said, hanging up the phone. Kane's in custody, Blackwood's evidence combined with Reeves's files. They have enough to put him away for 3 consecutive life sentences. And the FBI has confirmed that you acted in lawful protection of a federal witness. All charges dropped. Emily sat down heavily. 3 days. That's all it had been. 3 days that had destroyed her life and rebuilt it into something else entirely. 3 months later, Emily stood in front of a classroom at Fort Sam Houston. 30 young medics looked back at her. Fresh faces, eager eyes. Kids who didn't yet understand what they were signing up for. "My name is Major Emily Bradford," she said. "Some of you may have heard of me. Most of what you heard is probably true. The rest is definitely true." Scattered, nervous laughter. "I'm here to teach you combat medicine. Not the textbook kind, the real kind. The kind that happens when everything's on fire and people are dying and you have to make decisions that will haunt you for the rest of your life." She paused, looking at their faces. "I'm going to teach you how to save lives when the rules don't apply. When protocol fails. When you have to trust your training and your instincts and the voice inside you that says not on my watch. Because that's what combat medicine is. It's not about following procedures. It's about refusing to give up, ever." The students leaned forward, listening, learning. In the back of the room, Colonel Garrett watched with quiet satisfaction. Beside him, Daniel Reeves stood in his dress uniform, fully recovered, back to active duty, but here to support the woman who'd saved his life twice. After class, Emily found them waiting. "How did it feel?" Reeves asked. "Good," Emily admitted. "Really good. Like I'm finally doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Teaching, fighting, making a difference, all of it." She smiled. "You were right. People like us aren't meant for normal." "No," Garrett agreed. "We're meant for this. The hard stuff, the impossible stuff, the things that need doing when everything's falling apart." They walked out together into the Texas sunlight, into whatever came next. Behind them, the classroom filled with new students. The next generation. The ones who'd carry forward the lessons Emily had learned in blood and fire and pain. The ones who'd refuse to look away when it mattered. The ones who'd remember that sometimes the right thing to do was break the rules and save lives, no matter the cost.